Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel, to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? Cam Bay, Vietnam. With binoculars and sonar, people probe Loch Ness for its monster. Expeditions search the Himalayas for abominable snowman. Guards here at the depot watch for Powell's ape. It's been nearly 3 years since the monster was almost seen by a blurry-eyed guard. Detecting movement on the perimeter, the guard fired and the beast fled. When morning came, the area was examined, and a footprint and trail of blood were found. The footprint was neither human nor ape. A picture was taken of the track, but no one could decide who or what made it. It wasn't long before Captain Powell, the then company commander, found his name associated with the monster. All that remains now is a small photograph on the ammunition area's orderly room wall. Perhaps the legend of Powell's ape is all there ever was, but the guards at the ammunition area here still have something to think about besides Charlie. Army Reporter, 27th of April, 1970. We are all familiar with stories of Sasquatch sightings and even the tales of Yeti in the snow-covered mountains of Tibet. Now it's time to introduce you to the Vietnamese version of Bigfoot. They were taking a breather. The 6-man patrol of the 101st Airborne Division's LRRPs was set up in a protective wagon wheel position, heads facing outward, feet pointed toward the center, as secure a formation as the terrain would allow, and it wasn't allowing much. The behind-the-lines patrol had taken them into a remote and difficult stretch of mountainous jungle in the Central Highlands. The terrain was rugged and steep, and at night the LRRPs had to wedge themselves between trees to keep from slipping and sliding downhill. Wiping the sweat from their eyes and leaning against their heavy rucksacks, the tired LRRPs tended to loosen straps to realign equipment as they rested, all the while watching and listening to the jungle around them. On quiet guard, the 6 soldiers were facing out against a wall of green and brown underbrush, guarding against any Viet Cong who might have tracked them or who might have happened upon them by chance. The combined weight of their rucksacks, weapons, and LBE, the load-bearing equipment harness that held their webbed gear, was 100 pounds or so. The climbing the steep hills with that kind of load took some doing, so the break was a momentary but necessary respite. Gary Linderer was thinking about the surrounding jungle. It was quiet and deceptively peaceful. The forest noises, the occasional rustling of the wind through the trees, the grunts of an animal in the distance, and the sounds of the birds could easily lull a soldier into false sense of serenity, even though the war was very much around them. However, if anything was out of the ordinary, there was no indication. That is, until a small tree and underbrush just 15 yards uphill began to shake violently. Linderer's attention and the frenzied focus of the other team members turned to the commotion. On guard, the LRRPs brought up their weapons and waited. Linderer was the closest team member to the hubbub. His heart was jumping in his chest as he watched and waited for the intruder. Well, he was ready for the VC soldier. He wasn't ready for the face that peered through the underbrush. If it was a Viet Cong soldier, then it was a damn ugly one. An oblonged head framed with hair-covered face, dark, deep-set eyes lay beneath the prominent brow, and they did nothing to complement the heavy jowls and angry mouth. As it stepped into a small clearing, Linderer could see that matted reddish-brown hair ran down the creature's neck and covered most of its body. Whatever it was, it stood at least 5 feet tall, had broad shoulders, long, thick, muscular arms and a heavy torso. It walked upright. In the small clearing, it stopped and studied the Americans. "What the hell is that?" someone called out behind Linderer. "It's a rock ape," said another team member. Another team member disagreed. "No, it ain't," he said. "I've seen rock apes, and that sure as hell ain't a rock ape. It's an orangutan, isn't it?" Linderer asked, while the others kept their eyes glued on the strange creature. "Well, if it is, then he can't read a map. There are no orangutans in Vietnam." The ape-like creature soon lost interest in the 6 LRRPs, turned back the way it had come, and easily climbed back up the steep rise. "It's an ape of some kind," one of the LRRPs said. "It has to be, but then maybe it wasn't." In the central highland region of Vietnam, in the remote province of Kon Tum, where the country bumps up against Cambodia and Laos, there is a mounting evidence of the existence of a strange human-like creature the locals call the people of the forest, or Gui Rung, or Ningui Rung, Bigfoot. While the Montagards and the other tribal people have believed in the non-human species have inhabited the region for centuries, scientists now say there may be something more to the folktale and legend. Toward the end of the American War in Vietnam, numerous sightings by Viet Cong and NVA soldiers of ape-like creatures walking upright became so overwhelming that the North Vietnamese Party Secretariat ordered scientists into the region to investigate the Ngui Rung while the war was still going on. In 1974, as the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong pushed south to overrun the country, Professor Vo Q of the Vietnam National University was sent to the region to conduct an investigation. Vo Q discovered the Ngui Rung footprint on the forest floor and made a cast of the impression, which was analyzed and studied by Vietnamese academics. It was wider than a human footprint and too big for an ape. The unusual find added credence to the folktale. It also set off a debate in the scientific arena. Other expeditions were mounted but yielded few results. Chance sightings of the Ngui Rung continued, ranging from small creatures to larger ones. Eyewitnesses had different opinions as to the exact color of the creature's body hair. Like those cited earlier, the latest Ngui Rung walked upright and was described as having human-like characteristics. In 1982, Professor Tran Hung Viet became the second scientist to discover a Ngui Rung footprint, and while scientists debated the actual existence of such creatures, many of the critics' arguments went up in smoke when zoologist John McKinnon and a team of scientists discovered 3 previous unknown mammals in the Vieux Quang Mountain rainforest in 1992. The discovery of the new mammals demonstrated that the remote regions might well hold other new discoveries, including clues that might solve the riddle of Vietnam's Bigfoot. Ironically, it was McKinnon who, in 1969, came across man-like footprints in the jungles of Borneo, described by locals to be the Batuat. McKinnon wrote that the toes of the creature looked quite human, and that the tracks would have been about the right size for an Asiatic black bear. However, the only bear known in Borneo is the sun bear, which is considerably smaller. To this day, the controversy continues, even as international teams of scientists scour the remote mountain jungles, looking for what local villagers say have always been there. Excerpt from Strange but True Stories of the Vietnam War. Krieg P.J. Jorgensen. It was 1969. I was on patrol one evening, just before dark, in the North 2 Corps in North Vietnam. We were returning to the hill when we encountered hostile fire. The squad was caught off guard, so we used what cover was available. The fight had been going on for only a few minutes when movement caught my eye. Through the thick vegetation, I saw what I thought was a large man breaking cover from behind my left side. As the thing ran past me, I realized it was no man, and was not really sure what I was seeing. The thing was about 7 feet tall and had an enormous build. Though not completely covered with hair, the thing had reddish-brown hair covering a good portion of its body. It had covered about 30 yards, very quickly passing just within feet of my position. When it got hit by the crossfire, the thing stumbled once or twice, but never fell. All of a sudden, the enemy broke and ran. One even left his weapon behind. They were yelling something, but none of us ever knew what they were yelling. We slowly regrouped and made sure no one was wounded and discussed what we thought we had seen. As it was getting dark and there were hostiles in the area, we decided to get back to the hill. That night we heard several howls sounding very similar to the ones that you have recorded, coming from all over the place. Some sounded like they were just outside of the hooch, and others sounded more than a mile away. There were all kinds of sounds, from whines to growls to sounds that sounded like barks. Needless to say, no one slept very well that night. The next morning, all of us that were on patrol decided to try to track this thing. It took a lot of talking to get the tops to let us go looking for it, but after hearing the same story from the whole squad, he decided to let us have a chance to bring it back. We returned to the area and found a blood trail leading into the jungle. We trailed it for quite some time when we found a body of an enemy soldier that had been almost entirely torn apart. We do not know exactly what happened, but I have a good notion of what may have happened. We basically ran out of the area back to our hill. The rest of the time we were in Vietnam, I never heard the sounds or saw anything like it again. The talk of what we had seen spread very quickly, and some of the locals called it a name that I can neither pronounce or remember, but the translation, if I recall, was stench monkey or foul monkey, something like that. I can't remember for sure. What I do know is that it bothered me so much that I transferred from there to a job on a helicopter so that I wouldn't have to be in the jungle anymore. After returning home to Alabama, when my tour ended, I occasionally heard sounds that reminded me so much of that encounter. It had been years since I left Alabama and moved to west central Illinois. I seldom thought of that day in Vietnam or the things I heard or saw. The recording is exactly what I heard over there. I would close my eyes and still hear the howl in Vietnam. Regrettably, I have mixed feelings about discovering your website revealed that someone else may know what I went through, frightened that there may be something in the area where I now live. I realize that you are interested in pursuing this creature or one like it, but let me warn you from someone who has seen what it is capable of firsthand. Don't. Name redacted. While at an Army military police school, my brother-in-law, Craig Mills of Boise, Idaho, met a Vietnam veteran that recalled a low-altitude Special Force drop in the interior during 67 to 68. It was the middle of the night. There were no villages for 15 miles. For a period of 3 nights, they heard choking and gurgling noises. On the 4th day, they found the upper half of a decomposed Bigfoot creature. It had been blown in half by something, but not them. This was apparently not the noise they had heard, A mate, possibly. This was the speculation that was circulating. They could see into the body cavity, spine, lungs, and such. All was crawling with bugs. There was shorter hair on the head. The eyes were sunk back an inch and a half from the brow line. It had long arms, very large and long fingers. One hand was still wrapped around a branch. He didn't say what color it was, but he did mention that it had a flat nose. If the creature had its legs, he estimated its height to be 8 feet. There was no sign of the lower half of the body. They were able to see the teeth, all flat, well-formed molars, except the canines, which were large and pointed, seemed adapted to living in the forest with long arms and fingers, or perhaps just builds night nests like gorillas sometimes do, name redacted. The matter of wild people or feral humans seems to be a reoccurring phenomenon in Southeast Asia. Once in a while, the Marines, I showed a Vietnamese colleague a reference in Mark Hall's hominid book to a term used for a wild man in Vietnam. He was surprised to see the word in print and explained that growing up in his village, a wild man and woman were once captured from the jungle after they had been stealing food, chicken, I think. Either they were killed or kept in caged prisons, something unfortunate in either case. They were people, he explained, and not something ape-like by any means. They were very dirty and had long, ragged hair, and I think... He said they could not talk. He seemed to suggest that while this was a rare occurrence, such incidents would be heard from time to time. Name redacted. We ran into them frequently, and I have a friend whose recon position on Dogman was overrun one night by hundreds of them. They made a noise that sounded like a dog barking. In fact, you'd swear it was a dog. One time on the ridge of Nui Moto, about 15 kilometers south of Hue, about 8 of them came walking up the trail and surprised a squad of our platoon while it was stopped for lunch. All hell broke loose because they looked very much like NVA soldiers in khaki, same height, size, color. As they came around the bend in the trail about 10 meters from the unsuspecting GIs. I was with the other 2 squads of the platoon eating our lunch on the far side of the clearing, about 50 meters wide, that spread the 2 elements. The trails wound up the ridge and then through the clearing. All of a sudden, and without any warning, the lone squad opened up with everything they had, M16s, M79s, and hand grenades. I grabbed about 300 rounds of gun ammo and my M60, then ran across the clearing with the platoon sergeant. Everyone else stayed. To the cover of a huge toppled tree that was lying on the far side and close to the point of contact. The Sarge and I looked at each other, nodded, and then came over top, ready to blast away, but what we saw instead blew us away. The firing had been non-stop, and we fully expected to engage a sizable enemy force, but instead we found ourselves looking at our men, some seated, some standing, some kneeling, and firing at these ghostly images, swooshing around in the brush and trees, some off the ground by that point, in all directions. All except one was light brown and reddish brown in color, and about 5.5 feet tall. One dark, almost black male remained fighting to protect the other's retreat, and he was flying through the branches and rushing the men with his teeth bared. He was one very brave animal, I will tell you that. Then, as someone just snapped their fingers, they all seemed to disappear. Zip! The male turned and ran into the trees and was out of sight in seconds. This may sound very strange, but although I had no or little concern about killing the enemy, the killing of the innocent animals turned my stomach and could enrage me if done without being necessity. But I searched the site but found not a drop of blood, which totally amazed me given the amount of firing that had gone on. I wonder to this day if the men were just shooting to scare the rock apes away, or if they were just really bad marksmen. The men who suffered the surprise looked a bit worse for wear, and I'm sure a few had to wash out their shorts as a result of this unwelcome visit. It really scared the crap out of them, I kid you not. We, on the other hand, did suffer one casualty. A trooper had an eardrum blown out by the muzzle blast of the first shot fired, because a trooper who first saw the apes just picked up his M16 and fired without saying a word, and the muzzle was right next to a poor fellow's ear when he did. Apart from that, I have all the same questions your students do, and would love to hear just exactly what sort of apes these are. Redacted. But 101 1st Airborne Division, 6970. Lieutenant Alan Spiza of Cumberland, Rhode Island spotted footprints while piloting a 101 1st Airborne Division helicopter. I've been looking for footprints from the air for quite a while now, and I noticed an exceptional size of these immediately. I landed to get a closer look, and sure enough, these tracks were about 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. Someone suggested that they were made by the Ho Chi Minh sandals, which are made from car tires. They were embedded deeply, indicating the heavy wearer. The stride of whatever made them was about 4 feet, he said. Warrant Officer Daryl Santella of Long Beach, California, saw the footprints at the same time as Spitza and estimated that if they were made by a man, he would have been about 8 feet tall. Well, there you have it, folks. This early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives folks like you a chance to share their experiences and theories judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.